Good morning, All West family. My name is Mackenzie Urian, your All West Select Sires Manager of Communications, and you are tuning in to episode 13 of All West All Access. Today we have a very special guest with us. Cris Hatch is our All West Select Sires Central California District Manager, and more importantly than being on our leadership team, Cris is one of our Select Reproductive Solutions Specialists. In fact, he was named SRS Specialist of the Year in 2017. Congratulations again on that, Cris. And for those of our viewers who may not be as familiar with all of our programs and services, can you tell us a little bit more about what SRS is and what is the goal of an SRS Specialist?
Well, there's a lot of different aspects of SRS. There's a lot of different ways to do it. We could do it the simplistic way. We look at SRS as being the overall looking at the herd. So part of my job as an SRS specialist is I go and I will go and work with in-house breeders, work with their outbreeders to look at the technique, look at how people are doing their job in that way, and then we could go. It starts from there. And it could go to the full-blown. We go do a full walkthrough. We look at cow grouping. We look at heat abatement. We look at sync protocols. We look at the dry periods, of course, the transition period. We go through the whole work, the whole gamut of things that we go into that would impact reproduction. And so it can be a lot of different ways that we go into it, and so SRS is pretty a wide topic.
So as an SRS specialist, as you just mentioned, you are troubleshooting reproductive issues in herds, and especially in this season of the year, one of those big issues is heat. As pretty much the whole nation knows right now, All West territory is experiencing record-breaking triple-digit heat, even in areas of our territory that are not used to those triple-digit temperatures like we are here in Central California. And it can really cause a lot of heat stress to the animals and in turn cause a lot of problems with reproduction, as you know very well. So Cris is here today to go into the topic of heat abatement and share some tips about cow cooling with all of you tuning in.
Well, heat abatement and heat stress in cows is extremely important in especially Central California. Some of the Eastern Washington side, we run into a lot of heat abatement issues and heat stress issues within cows. And so walking a dairy and really evaluating what the issues are on herds, you have to look at everything. And so, I think that I'm going to start today with talking about both open lots and free stalls. So one of the basic things on heat abatement is the soaker system. So in the past, they've had misters or sprinklers, but a good soaker system that covers every cow that's locked up in the stanchions, gets them soaked quickly, make sure that you have enough volume of water and the right nozzles to get them soaked. That is a system that can go through dry cows, close-up cows, open lots, free stalls, but a good soaker system is crucial. And these days, most people have a decent soaker system. And so after looking at that and making sure that it's working, is making sure that it's set right. So when you're looking at a soaker line and a soaker system, I'll look to see if it's covering all the cows, if they're not spread too wide. The nozzles can't be spread too wide. Most of the time we want around 5 feet apart, and that way they get good coverage through all the cows, because the goal is to get as many cycles of that on and off of that soaker system as possible. So on a soaker line is we're wanting to go and turn these soakers on, and we want them to soak these cows with big droplets of water and do it quickly. That way we could turn it off and let the cows really cool. Cow cooling and the efficiency of that It's not when that cow is getting water dumped on it. It's that evaporative cooling is what we're looking for. And so the time that the water is off is the time that we're looking at. And so we want to go and so you want a soaker line that's going to soak them right away, and then you turn it off and you leave them off until that cow is about 80% dry. And so evaluating that, it's going to be from herd to herd depending on what corrals we're looking at, if it's an open lot or open lot with a shade, if it is a freestall with full-blown fans that are going and a good air volume going across them. Those cows of course are going to evaporate faster, and so it's not a set time. It's going to be from herd to herd, from corral to corral that we're going to have to look at and make sure that that water is on at the right time and for the right amount of time. One of the biggest things that I've seen in the last, 10 years is that people put in these soaker lines, but they haven't gotten the full impact of them. Most of the time they don't have the right controller or they don't have the settings set right as far as the amount of time that it's on and off. So most of the time I look for an Edstrom controller. That's the one that I'm most familiar with and that I've seen that works the easiest and best. You can control 4 different stations with it. You can control your on-off time, and then it has a high and low setting, and then it has a smart mode. So, most cows will start coming into heat stress around 68 degrees, of course, depending on what the humidity is like. They say really if high-producing cows can become heat stressed at 65 degrees. So getting that set right is really important. That it doesn't matter what temperature it is. You're going to want that soaker line to be able to soak those cows, and that way you could get that evaporative cooling to be working in that pen. And so that's one of the key elements of heat stress or cow cooling. It doesn't matter what corral we're in, and so that's extremely important. Then the second part of the cow cooling, of course, is either shades. If you're looking at open lots, if you're looking at dry cow pens, shades out in the corrals, and then a good shade cloth or a good shade over the feed bunks. It is extremely important for dry cows and milk cows alike. I'll go into the impacts of that heat stress on those dry cows a little bit later. And then we'll look into fans. So again, that's another thing that people have had for a long time is the fans and soaker lines. It really is, do we turn them on early enough? You're going to want those fans to be on, right around the same time that the soaker line comes on, and start that cooling process. There's a whole bunch of different fans out there. One of the more popular, the better fans as far as volume and speed is make sure I get the name right, is the Artec 51-inch panel fan. So that's what a lot of people have, and that's a good fan to use. They also have that's out these days is a Artec storm fans that can be all the way up to 84 inches in diameter, and they'll use those down the feed lane. But so if you're using those panel fans, most free stalls, if that's where you're going to be using them, you could put them. There's some people that have put them every pole over the beds, and that does cool them well when they're over the beds, but it's not necessarily the best way to mount them. That could be around 20 feet apart. What some people have done is if they did have that in line, so they're all in line, and so you have in a free stall you'd have 2 rows of beds most of the time in California here. So you'd have 2 rows of direct airflow, but it doesn't really push a lot of air down the mangers or over the cows at the bunk. And so what some people have done is alternated that to where you have one pole, a fan over the beds, and then the next pole 20 feet down, the fan would be over the cows that are standing at the manger. And then so you're alternating that. So basically you're widening that throw. So what that does is help you to go and and move that whole volume of air across those cows. You're replacing that volume of air that's in the free stalls. You're wanting to get somewhere around 6 mile an hour of airflow going across those cows to get a really good, efficient evaporative cooling on those cows. And again, so if you have that flow, you're going to have to adjust how often your soaker line comes on. It's going to have to be more frequent because you're pushing that air across those cows, and it'll evaporate that water pretty quick. And so that's something that's kind of been new. The people that have started using the Artec storm fans, and what they do is they'll put it down the feed lane. So they'll put it right down the center of your freestall, down the feed lane. And again, what the purpose of that is it's just replacing that full volume of air. It doesn't have, when you have just those two lines of fans, you're not replacing that full volume of air. It's going and you're pushing air hard in one area, and it kind of gets mixed up, and it doesn't go and keep that volume of air moving. So mixing that up is a new thing that has been very effective. People have done very well with that. And so that's one of the newer things, the difference of the two systems. If you're using the Aerotech fans, the 51 inchers that are one above the bed and the other one above the cow on the manger or at the manger, what that does is it truly does force that air down into those cows in both areas, and it does pushes the full volume of air out of the corral. So I think that is probably a better system to use. The Artec storm fans, and putting those down the manger is a simple system, so it works well. You don't need very many fans, and there aren't belts to change. So that's a big plus in that, is that those Aerotech fans, one of the big issues with them is maintenance. So you have a 1 or 1.5 horse motor on those fans, and it's belt driven, and it has a tensioner on it. Is the fact that the belts break, bearings go out, the tensioner gets loose, and so it takes maintenance. The storm fans that go down the middle, it's a 5 horse motor that has a direct drive, a variable speed drive, and you don't have that. It's not quite as noisy. So there's pluses to that, but if you're just wanting to get the best system to cool cows, and you'll do the maintenance, I really feel like that Artec Apex 51 inch fan is the best. You have a lot of different other fans that are out there. The ones that are cage fans, those I would really watch out for. Because those cage fans tend to get all mucked up, and a lot of manure gets blown around, and a lot of dust, and those cages get caked. And I've seen them to where you're probably losing 50 to 60% of your efficiency because there's so much stuff caked on those the cages. So that's one of the things that I would watch out for as far as fans go. And so, that's looking at your soaker lines, and that's looking at your fan system. So the next big thing is your milk parlor and getting it in your holding pen. And so that's something that's become real popular, because it's the biggest impact on those cows. So people that have soaker lines and fans out in the free stalls, and then they don't have cooling in their holding pen, is they're throwing 300 cows in there that are over 100 degrees and packing them all together, and it definitely has a major impact. So let's say you breed them in the morning, you keep them nice and cool in the morning, and then you kick them into the holding pen in the afternoon, and all you do is cook those embryos or those babies, and to where it really has a major impact. Even though you're doing a good job on the outside, But you bringing all those animals in and not having a cooling system for that, it just has a major impact. For a holding pen, there's a couple different ways. I still like the grid system as far as a soaking line. So you have soaker lines going over the top of your holding pen, and you use cone shape nozzles, and you could get a grid, and it's just the most consistent spray, and you'll want the same thing. People will put those in and then put a manual on off for milkers to be able to manage it. That's not going to get the cooling that you want. You really want to maximize that cooling, because I've seen dairies that make it through the summer without that major impact on your repro and without that major reduction in milk flow. And so if you're going to spend the money on the system, put it in there to where it's going to work right every day when it's supposed to, and not rely on people. And that's a major issue. And so a grid system is just a soaker lines system that are in a grid pattern to where it's just very efficient, very consistent flow. You turn them on for 20-30 seconds, hopefully. If you get the coverage that you need, you want the cone pattern to overlap to where it gets every cow in there. And you want it to soak, and then you want it to turn off until the fans, you have banks of fans again. Look into the fan quality, and those 51 inchers work on most barns to be able to put a good bank of fans, several banks of fans in most holding pens to force air down into those cows. You want that air to be blowing away from the milk parlor. You don't want to blow that outside hot air and that humidity coming off of those cows into the milk parlor where they're milking. You want it to blow away. You want all the fans to be facing the same direction, and to get the most efficient cooling there. And again, set it on a timer. Set it on a temperature timer. That's just temperature on and off those fans. And so you have the grid pattern, and there's also another system. It's called an IWAB that throws water all over the place. It has a wide spread, but it can be a little bit inconsistent as far as the coverage goes, and so you might have holes and pockets. That's where I kind of like the grid and that cone system just a little bit better, just because it's more consistent. Another part of cow cooling that is very important is water intake. These cows, they can be drinking 25 to 30 gallons of water a day. And so out in the corrals, if you're out in the free stalls or open lots, you're wanting to have around 4 linear inches of water, clean water, for these cows to drink out in the corral. Of course, multiple locations. I'm in California here that we use a large diameter PVC a lot of the time to make a fairly inexpensive water trough, and it seems to work well. They seem to be fairly durable, easier to clean, and so that is an option for that. That water intake and the access to water is huge. The other aspect of the water is on the exit lanes. So on the exit lanes, you'll want basically 2 linear feet of water trough space for those cows when they're exiting the barn. So if they're coming out and you have water for one side, one exit lane on one side, and you have 30 animals that you're milking on that side, so you're going to want 60 feet of water right there. The cows, after they get milked, that is when they want to replenish that liquid that they just let free. So you're going to want plenty of good, clean water there. And cleaning those water troughs is very important. Having a person out there to clean those water troughs on a regular basis is extremely important. That water intake is gonna keep them going and get them back to the feed bunk and make them to where they'll have a lot less impact of that heat stress.
So, Cris, can you tell us a little bit more about what are the specific consequences to reproduction when it comes to heat stress?
Most people that are watching this probably know the impact on repro and production on the milk cows and what that does. And it makes such a big it hits you in so many different ways. You get your lack of production for that summer. You get your lack of reproduction for that summer, so you're not getting those pregnant cows. So you get into October, November, and all of a sudden you get all these cows pregnant. And so that impact of that low, not getting those cows pregnant, and then all of a sudden 9 months later you don't have fresh cows when you don't get them pregnant, and that makes it to where you have several months of very few animals that are in their peak production. So, when you don't get any pregnancies for July, August, September, 9 months from that, when they come fresh, and then, whenever they hit their peak production, you'll have very few cows because you couldn't get them pregnant in the summertime. So you'll get that impact of low production in your summer, not just because of the heat, but because of the heat the previous year. And so that's the effect on the milk cows. On the dry cows and the close-up barn, that impact is there's a lot more research on that these days. The research is showing that the calves that are in womb that the dry cows are pregnant with, when those cows go through that heat stress, they calve out, and they could be up to 14 pounds lighter. And so not just do they calve out underweight, their production is lower. They could lose anywhere from 8 to 11 pounds of milk production per day when they get into the milk parlor. We're talking another 2-3 years down the road that it's still going to impact you from that one summer. And then the impact on those dry cows themselves when they get into the barn.
Thank you, Cris. You have provided some really useful information for our listeners today. And if you could just give us one last takeaway, what we really need to understand about heat abatement, what would that be?
Cooling your dry cows is extremely important. You get people used to throw those dry cows out in the back corral and feed them straw and expect them to come into the parlor and milk well. And nowadays you want to get a good ration for them out there. You want to get a good heat abatement for them. And that, again, gets that soaker line, get that shade over the feed lane, get that shade out in the corral. And that way your cows can come in, and when they come in, they do better. And those calves that are in those cows, they do better through their life. So it has a long-lasting effect, this heat abatement, and there's a lot of different stuff. It's continually changing. But one of my biggest things is, if you spend the money on the system, use it to the best that you could use it. Start it early. Some people are starting the soakers and the fans at 65 degrees, thinking that a lot of those cows, you don't want them to get to that heat stress. A lot of people are letting them get to and through that heat stress a little bit before they decide that they want to spend the money on the electricity for the fans. But that impact of low reproduction and low production is just huge. So there's a lot of different things you can do with that. Again, on the dairies these days is being efficient in what you do, and that it goes across the board. And it's the same thing with the heat stress in doing that. The details are huge. There's not a lot of wiggle room in the dairy industry right now, so you want to make as much money every day as you can, and this is a big part of it. Is heat abatement and minimizing heat stress is huge.
Thank you so much for providing that great insight with us today, Cris. I know you are a very busy SRS specialist, and we really appreciate the time that we had with you. For any of our viewers who are tuning in and have any questions about heat abatement or any other SRS related topic, please leave your questions in the comments of this video, and Cris or one of our other team members will get back with you. Also, as a reminder, our next sire summary evaluations are taking place Tuesday, August 10th. So next month's All West All Access episode will be giving you proof highlights. So we really look forward to having you tune in and sharing those new results with you. We will see you next month. Thank you again.